Hey guys, happy Friday. Welcome to season 4 of the Collaboration Conversation, a listener-supported video podcast where Christian artists, entrepreneurs, and friends share about their upcoming projects and how they are using the gifts and talents that God has given them. To what end? To share the good news of King Jesus, of course. Today, our special guest is Raeanne Newquist. Raeanne has been a world traveler with Mercy Ships and is a podcaster for their ministry. She is a wife and a mom. She loves to travel, grow her own food, hike, and she loves the Los Angeles Angels. Just kidding.
Whoa!
Just kidding. She's a Dodgers fan.
Yes.
Raeanne, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. It's really fun to get to answer questions as opposed to ask them.
Yes.
So I'm looking forward to this.
How cool.
It's really funny. I was on someone else's podcast just once, and I just kept wanting to ask her questions. It was, she kept trying to ask me questions.
You're the guest.
So yeah, you might be thinking, I really like to ask them this. So, so how long have you been a Dodgers fan?
Oh my goodness. Well, I blame it all on my son. So I have a 13-year-old son, and when he was really little, he started playing baseball, like little rookie camp, and then moved up to t-ball, and it was fun, but whatever. But when he hit, I want to say about 8 years old or so, they started playing with real rules. And then when he was 9 and when he was 10, it was riveting. These kids were so good. I was obsessed. And when the season would end, I would have withdrawals. And I'd say to my husband, what are we going to do now? And one point, my husband said, well, we could start watching the Dodgers. And I have to tell you, that Dodger season, I did not miss one game. Wow. I would record every game. My family would go to bed. I would be up until 1 o'clock in the morning by myself watching Dodger baseball. I was completely hooked and totally obsessed. So I want to say I haven't missed a game since, but living overseas definitely put a damper on my record of Dodger games. But
that is the coolest.
I'm a true fan.
That's love incredible. That.
We
love baseball.
Well, that's true. We're a baseball family.
A big baseball family.
Well, so do you go to many? Did you live there at a time when you could go to games?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
A lot?
I loved going to Dodger games. We didn't go to a ton.
Okay.
It is a little pricey. I don't love to just sit in the blazing sun. But
yeah.
I mean, you get a night game. And the nights in the summertime in Los Angeles are gorgeous.
Yes.
Love a Dodger dog. Love to go to the games.
Oh, that's so
funny.
Cool.
Well,
I'm so jealous.
So our history is probably not too dissimilar. We're Angels fans. I mean,
no.
I know, sorry, but I was born in Cincinnati, so we were huge Reds fans. So when we moved from the Midwest to California, there was no chance I could be a Dodgers fan, right? I mean, that was our arch enemy. And my senior year of high school, I had a friend from elementary school that got recruited, first round draft choice by the Angels, a guy I knew, and he played with them for 14 years. So there was nothing I could do. We were Dick Schofield fans from then on, and he played for quite a while. And then of course the kids, they all started playing, and I'm sure Dodgers have this, but they have the Junior Angels fan club, so we got a free ticket every month.
Oh, fun.
So yeah, and we were 5 minutes.
I would say we lived in the area. We were
5 minutes from Anaheim Stadium.
So.
Oh, that's great.
So yeah,
we love baseball. One of my favorite movie quotes is from Moneyball, which is you can't help but be romantic about baseball, and that's how we feel. We love it. But I think it's interesting.
Well, kindred spirits.
Yes,
we love the game.
It's very interesting though, because you would rather watch it at home. And I can't stand watching baseball on my TV. I feel like I have to be there in the atmosphere.
Even if it's a minor league game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we do have a fun little minor league team down the street. But anyway, I digress about baseball.
Yeah, but it was just awesome when you said that was one of the things in there. I perked up and I called her immediately. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to be fun.
Yes.
So.
Oh, I love it. Well, I have to clarify. I would hands down much rather be in Dodger Stadium than in my home watching.
Fair.
If, finances were of no object.
That's fair.
Well, and it is kind of a dangerous outing at this point in life.
A little bit, sometimes.
There's times when like a freeway series and I'm thinking, I just don't want to go. I don't want to, I'm not that big of an Angels fan that I want to die for this. So.
That's funny.
Anyway, well, so I went to NRB a couple months ago, and I think I may have told you this. I was on mission to find 12 people that we could have on the podcast, just out of our circle, just way, out of how we interact with folks. And I met you, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to persuade her no matter what. You were so engaging, and maybe it's the Southern California connection, but oh my gosh, I loved hearing about the Mercy ships. And anyway, I was like on a mission. So if you don't mind, start us off and just tell us a little bit about you and your family.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I am a mom. I'm married, and I'm a mom of 3 kids. I have 2 daughters that are identical twins, and they just had their 16th birthday a couple weeks ago. They're sophomores in high school. And then I have a son, my little baseball player. I was at his game last night. He is 13 and in 7th grade. So that's all about to change, though, because we have 1 week left of school and then they'll all bump up a grade. But yeah, I love being a mom. I love my kids. Oftentimes, I don't feel like I'm their mom. I feel like they're just people that live in my house that I take care of. And sometimes I kind of think, am I really old enough to have kids? But yes, I am. I look in the mirror and go, oh, yeah, you are. But yeah, so Southern California is home to us, but we have relocated to Northern California, and we're still kind of getting our feet wet. The kids are acclimated very well, have some great friends. My husband and I think, are still moving into a new community and trying to meet people. So it doesn't feel like home quite yet to us. But we're enjoying it. There's a lot of newness where we're at. We left the ocean in Southern California and came up to the mountains, and we are a mile from a really big, beautiful lake. So that's been a lot of fun as well. And I do work for Mercy Ships. So I'm on the marketing team there.
That's awesome.
Really enjoy working remotely, which is a little bit strange, but that has been a gift for our family, and just love being connected with this organization that really means a lot to our family.
Ugh, that is awesome. Well, okay, we are very familiar with Mercy Ships, except my speaking isn't catching up with me. But for those of our listeners who maybe aren't familiar or haven't heard of that, just share with us a little bit about what Mercy Ships is. And what you guys do.
So we have the largest civilian hospital ships in the world. And we just launched a brand new purpose-built ship that makes us a 2-fleet operation now, which is really exciting. And what we do is we will pull into a port in West Africa. That's where we primarily serve right now, is West Africa. And we'll pull into a port for 10 months. And we are a surgery ship. So we perform about 6 different specialty surgeries, all for free, for impoverished people in that developing nation that we're serving in. And everyone on board, from the captain to surgeons, nurses, housekeeping, everyone is a volunteer. We all pay to be there.
Wow.
So it's a very unique business model, but it is absolutely extraordinary and phenomenal. So I kind of talk about it a little bit like summer camp for adults, because you go, and whereas it is very intense and everyone is incredible professionals that are highly skilled and trained in their field, but there's like dress up nights and pirate parties because we're living on a ship. And, people leave notes on your doors, like in college, or little welcome notes, and they decorate your room. And there's skit nights. There's so many fun community activities going on that when we lived on board as a family, I thought, oh my gosh, pinch me. I'm living in summer camp. This is my dream life, So
that's cool.
It's pretty incredible. And just to see the lives of the patients be transformed is absolutely life-changing for anyone who's on board. It's really spectacular.
Yes.
So a wonderful ministry.
Oh my gosh.
Well, yes. So is there, what's specific about West Africa? Is that just, where you guys have been?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, first of all, probably the best answer to that for anybody listening would be to go listen to the first episode of the New Mercies podcast, because we had Dawn and Dion Stevens as our very first guests, and they are the founder of Mercy Ships. And Don's story of God giving him this vision for ships in West Africa, the story is riveting and it is so inspiring. I can't even really summarize it and do it justice. Yeah. So I would say go listen to episode 1, The History of Mercy Ships with Don and Dion Stevens. But really, it's interesting because, we say that there's about 5 billion people globally that lack access to safe surgery. And over 50% of the world's population lives near a coastline. It just kind of makes sense that our ships would deliver state-of-the-art medical care to people in developing nations that lack access to safe and timely, affordable surgery. Right. And our surgery is completely free to everybody in need.
That totally makes sense. And is there some magic number to the 10 months? I mean, is there something magic about that? Or just that?
Not necessarily. I think, because it's a ship, there is routine maintenance that needs to be done, being in salt water and the elements and so forth. So basically we pull in and then there's a counted amount of time to set up the operation. Okay. Really, we have to set up the dock with tents and there's security and all sorts of things that go on. We have to set up the hospital every time we pull into port and get all the equipment out, sterilize everything, etc. And then bring the patients on board. And because of some of the surgeries that we do, there is a prolonged period of recovery for the patients. They might be in rehab for 2 to 3 months after their surgery. Wow. So we can't really come in and leave. Right. Got to stay a little bit. Yeah. But then we also need to get the ship out of there and it has to go into maintenance mode. It'll go to the Canary Islands and sometimes in dry dock to be repainted or scraped down, I don't know, fixed up a little bit. Yeah. So,
Wow. That is incredible. How in the world did you get involved with that? I mean, was it really just, we want to go and see what this is like?
No, not at all. So we have a dear friend named Beth Kirchner, and she is currently on the Global Mercy, our new ship, teaching. But she was a kindergarten teacher on board. We knew her from Southern California, very dear to our family. She's an identical twin, or she's a twin, I should say. I don't know if they're identical, but she's a twin. And so my daughters gravitated towards her and her sister as older mentors to look up to. But one day Beth contacted us and she said, I heard about this ministry and I'm going to go volunteer to be a kindergarten teacher on board this ship. Would you support me? And so our family supported Beth and kind of learned a little bit about Mercy Ships then. And we kept up with her on her journey and we'd FaceTime her and, we thought it was interesting. But when my husband was reaching retirement age, he was in law enforcement for over about 20 years. Oh, wow. And when he was approaching retirement age, he said, I really want to get back into full-time ministry. When I met my husband, he was an associate pastor of a church in Malibu. And he's like, I want to get back into full-time ministry, but I don't really want to go back into the church necessarily. So we were looking at different organizations to serve in. And he said, hey, I should look up Mercy Ships where Beth is. And Mercy Ships was hiring a chaplain for 2019, 2020 for a 2-year commitment. And he's like, I think I should apply. And I thought, yeah, go for it. My very calculated, very safe, very type A husband will never in a million years move his family to live on a ship in West Africa. So I was like, yeah, go for it. Sure. Did not ever think that this very safe conservative man would actually do it, but we did.
Wow.
So, that's incredible.
That is awesome.
So did you have a job too as well, or you the family just goes with him, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the way it works on the ship is if you are a family that comes, one of the parents is working full time and the other parent is a primary caregiver of the children. And depending upon your children's ages, that's how long you're going to work. So everyone has to work. And because my kids were older, I was able to work a longer work week because my kids were in school all day. Now, there's some people on board who have 2-year-olds. And so that parent is only with the children. So for me, I was the primary caregiver when my children were out of school. Mm-hmm. So the minute they were out of school, then I couldn't be working. So I worked in the communications department for a while. And then once we hit the pandemic and went into that mode, I transitioned into chaplaincy with my husband, which really is my background. So.
Oh, that's awesome.
That is awesome.
So obviously that's what led you into your current role as your I mean, you do their podcast for them, right?
I do.
All right. Well, tell us about it. And it's I have that here. It's called Mercy.
It's called New Mercies.
New Mercies. I love that title.
New Mercies. Yeah. Just thinking of that passage in Lamentations that says, God's mercies are new for us every morning.
Yes.
And his faithfulness is so great. So I thought, you know what? Yes, we need something positive. We need to hear of people doing great things in the world instead of all this negativity. Let's hear about the new mercies that God gives us every day.
Amen.
And that we get to experience. So, the stories that people walk away with after their time on the ship, whether it's a patient or a crew member, the stories are just amazing. And having been on board myself, I just thought, we need to hear more of these stories. And I approached marketing where I was working as a writer, and I said, I would love to do a podcast. And I quickly found that I was not the first person to bring this up. There had been several people who said, we should do a podcast. We should do a podcast. But I'm lucky enough to get to do it. And I love letting our crew and our partners, and hopefully in the future, our patients kind of tell their own stories in their own words and in their own voice. Because we write them in marketing, we write their stories, to let people know, but it's totally different when you get to hear it from their own mouths. So that's what we're doing. We're hearing the testimonies of God's faithfulness, God's miracles, God's mercy through our crew and our partners that have served.
That is so cool. I mean, you have literally just, I'm sure, a page of people that check them off as you get to hear their stories.
Dozens and dozens, yeah.
Is it weekly?
It is, yeah. We put up a new episode every Monday.
Okay. And how do you record them, just one at a time, or?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I try not to do more. I try not to stack more than one in a day because, as you know, I mean, you guys do it the different way. You stack them all together. But for me, I get kind of a little mushy in the brain when I start crossing stories with different people. I'm like, wait, no, that was the guy I talked to yesterday. Hold on. No, no. I try to just do one at a time.
That's awesome.
But yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's been a great way to stay connected.
Yes.
So.
Well, have you always done it via Zoom, or did you do them in person before the pandemic?
No, because the podcast only started last November. So we've only been up and running, I want to say, about 8 months. I just uploaded my 25th episode.
Congratulations.
So,
Yay. That's awesome. There's a fun statistic that I always like to bring up. It's like 10% of podcasts ever go past episode 5. Like,
I think it's 2
or 3.
Yeah.
So
goodness.
It's very exciting that you're at 25.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah, well, we supported, my husband and I supported his cousin who was on a Mercy ship for a while. Why is that so hard to say?
Mercy ship is a little hard for me to say. I think it's just my speech impediment that I probably get from you.
Mercy ship. But anyway, so it was fun to get, he'd send a postcard every once in a while or some kind of update so that we would be able to follow his journey. And he was like an engineer. I mean, below decker. I mean, I don't know. He wasn't a doctor by any means, I don't think so.
Right.
But anyway,
That's
it was that was such a blessing. I'm sure for him for those 2 years that I think he did it, but then for us to be able to support him and watch that journey. So
yeah, it's such an incredible experience. It definitely was probably one of the best years of my life, I have to say, as an individual, but also as a mom and as a wife, to see my husband thrive in that environment. And if I'm being totally honest, it was really, really devastating for us to have to leave because of the pandemic. We didn't get to fulfill our commitment. Get a little emotional
Sorry.
here.
Yeah.
But we really, we gave up everything to go do that. And that's the life we wanted for our family.
Yeah.
And it was hard, it was challenging, but to see our kids thrive in that environment, to see them experience a part of the world, and really the world is on board because there's over 40 nationalities represented at any given time on board amongst the crew.
That's amazing.
So my son's teacher was from New Zealand. Kids in his class were from Brazil and the UK, and one of his best buddies was Dutch. I mean, you've got kids and families and crew members from all over the world to be in this international community, but all to be like-minded, focused on one mission was just incredible. And it was so life-giving. And I just can't say enough about it. And it's just been a real challenge to have that kind of ripped out from under us because of this pandemic, and our situation was a little bit different. Because the ship is back. The ship just returned after almost 2 years of being out of service. The Africa Mercy went back to Dakar, Senegal in February, almost 2 years after we left because of the pandemic. And they are finishing what we started. They are meeting with patients and performing surgeries that we had to kind of postpone and leave behind. So that's pretty awesome.
Awesome.
It does sound like just a slice of heaven, right? That's what it's going to be like in heaven.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic.
Absolutely.
Well, talk to us a little bit about maybe a favorite story or two from your time there. I mean, you just painted the most beautiful picture of community that your kids got to be a part of, but are there any specific stories that stick out to you?
Oh my gosh, there are so many. But I think one of the most personally impacting stories for me was when the pandemic hit. So we were kind of living in this bubble. I don't want to say fantasy land, but we were not really experiencing what the rest of the world was experiencing. We weren't experiencing what the United States was experiencing. We were hearing like, oh my gosh, the LA freeways are a ghost town. And my friends would send me pictures of the 405 where there's no cars.
Yeah.
And no one has toilet paper or anything. And we were kind of like, what? This is really strange. Like we're not experiencing this. Ironically, we had two very good friends, Dave and Nancy Worth, who my husband pastored with Dave Worth years ago before he was in law enforcement, and amazing couple that mentored us and supported us in Mercy ships.
Awesome.
And anyways, they said, we are going to come over and visit you guys. So they booked a trip and they arrived on Thursday, March 12th. Of 2020. And right before that, we heard about Italy was having a little bit of this issue with this new virus and blah, blah, blah. And so my friend kept calling and saying, are you sure we can still come? And I said, I got to be honest with you. Here it's business as usual. I mean, we've got people flying in and out from all over the world all the time because we'll have surgeons who will just come for 2 weeks at a time, or we'll have some nurses that'll just come for 2 months. So there are people coming and going off the ship at all times. Everyone's always making airport runs,
Gotcha.
And I said, no, everything's just totally normal here. And she said, okay. So they flew in on Thursday night. They got in at about 11 o'clock at night on March 12th, 2020. And the next day, Friday the 13th, things started to change. And then we shut down everything by Saturday morning.
Oh my gosh.
And they got right back on a plane and left. They were there for 36 hours. And we immediately went into lockdown on the ship, and to protect our patients and to protect our crew and really to protect Senegal.
Yeah.
Because if anyone was infected on board the ship, we would have to check into a local hospital, which most people think, well, why? You're a hospital ship. We're a surgery ship. We're not infectious disease.
Right.
So we weren't equipped with ventilators and ICU beds and all that kind of stuff. So we needed to wrap up real quick and get out, because if our crew of 400 people got infected, we would totally overrun the medical, system that they had in place that was, weak at best. So anyways, all that to say that when we were in the midst of shutting everything down, and it was very stressful and a very, very difficult time, we realized that one thing that Mercy Ships really relies on in a big way is our local day crew that come on board and serve as our translators. They serve in every single department on board the ship.
Wow.
Communications, housekeeping, in the galley, cooking, in the hospital. We rely on about 250 local people. We employ them to come on board every day.
Wow.
And we thought, how are we going to shut this down without these people? But yet we can't have them going home to their village and coming back every day.
Right.
And so we asked who would be willing to isolate with us, leave your families and come and stay with us until we are able to leave. They all said yes.
Wow.
Oh my gosh, that gives me chills.
Yeah.
There was one man in particular, his name was Mambala, and he sat at our little guard station at our port entrance. So where our dock was, and then going into the port, we had a little security guard there, Mambala. And my twin daughters would have to take the trash out for the academy, because there's a fully accredited academy on board where the kids go to school every day. And they'd have to take the trash out. So they'd have to go out into the port, and Mambala would always let them out. And so he got to know some of the kids. And so when we were going out as a family one time, Mambala, waves at my daughters, hi, Emma, hi, Georgia, and I kind of looked like, but he, we got to know him a little bit because we would go in and out all the time. And so on the day that, our day crew said they would stay with us and isolate with us to help us, I was down on the dock and I saw Mambala, and I went up to him and I just said, Mambala, thank you. Thank you for staying with us. And he looked at me and he said, well, of course, Mom, you are my family.
Oh.
And I just sat there and cried because I thought, I come from such an individualistic society where it's all about what's best for me.
Yep.
And what is good for me. And if someone said, will you isolate with us and leave your family? I'd be like, no, I'm so sorry. I can't do that. But you know what? I will pray for you guys. Good luck.
Yeah.
I need to go I don't want to get sick. Whatever this pandemic thing is,
Right.
But that's not the mindset of the African people. It's the whole is more important than the part.
Yes.
They're all about community and all about family. And so it wasn't even a question for them. They said, well, you are our family. So of course we will stay with you. And that, I just thought, what a gift to be raised with that mentality.
Yeah.
For me, it's transforming my mind to adopt that mentality because I was not raised that way at all.
Same, yeah.
But how can I instill that in my children, to just say, hey guys, what is best for our family is best as opposed to what is just best for you.
Right.
So just beautiful people. I could go on and on and on, but there's one little story.
I love it. No,
Yeah.
that was beautiful.
That is sweet.
That picture of community is just spectacular. And something that I think we desperately need, especially these days. Well, I want to ask you, we're trying something new in season 4, and I wanted to ask you if you could share one thing to our listeners about who Jesus is, what would that be?
That's a tough question. That's a big question. Obviously there are so many things that Jesus is. You hear about the popular things. He's your friend, he's got his love, right? Jesus is Savior, and he's the Prince of Peace. Probably in this season of life that I'm in, I would say I'm most impressed by the fact that Jesus is a man of sorrows. Oh. And he meets us in our place of grieving and in our place of loss, in our place of pain. And that to me is so much more important at this season than some of those other characteristics that Jesus is.
Totally.
I know that we talk a lot about being blessed, and, there's even like #blessed t-shirts and all that kind of funny stuff. And I was in a Bible study group recently, and they said, what does it mean to have the blessed life? And everyone was sharing these different things. Oh, to be healthy. And I've got beautiful grandkids and I'm so blessed, and I kind of raised my hand and I said, guys, I gotta buckle up. I'm about to take a real sharp left turn here. And my husband kind of grabbed me under the table, like, be careful. We're new here. We don't know these people. And I just said, you know what? Jesus himself says in Matthew, blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who are persecuted. And I said, I think a blessed life is one that is marked with suffering for Christ. And it's blessed because he is with us in the midst of our suffering. That's what makes it blessed, is his presence with us. And so to know that Jesus hurts alongside me and he feels my grief and my pain, that to me is probably the most important characteristic of my Savior in this season of my life.
You said that so beautifully.
Yeah.
And it's so true. It's just absolutely true. For our listeners who maybe don't know Jesus or don't have a relationship with him, if you want to chat with us, we would love to chat with you about who he is. You can head over to projectbrickworks.org/Jesus. And we would love for you to check out those resources because ultimately that's why we're here, right? That's why we have these conversations, and we want to bring him honor and glory and to introduce you to him because he is good. And
And I love you sharing your heart on that. I think, I don't know if it's just happening in America, but I think that there's this push to get back to normal after the pandemic. And I just don't think there is and I don't want to say a new normal because that just sounds so cliche, but there's something that's lingering. And I think it's a mourning, and I don't know what exactly we're mourning, but I think everybody is feeling it at some level. For me, I lost the career I had for 25 years, and everybody's got a story. And you're so right. Jesus meets us where we're at, and I love that. So,
I mean, there's a collective mourning of the last 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, everybody's mourning that, but then you're right. Everyone individually, whether it's a loved one or a job, whatever it is, we all are, I think, collectively mourning in this. And there's a heavy grief about that. So,
and I think it's sad because we're not really taught how to grieve.
Totally.
I think we're taught to avoid grief and painful things, but I think grief is such an important part of life. And I was telling people, I got married a little bit later in life. All my friends were married and long before I ever was. And I said, when I got married, I had to grieve my single life. And everyone's like, what? You spent your first year of marriage grieving? And I said, yeah, because I'm not able to fully embrace married life until I let go of being single. And I said, I think grieving is honoring. I wanted to honor my single season of life because it was worthy to be honored. It was amazing and it was great. And I loved it. And so when it was over, it really impacted me. And I had to grieve that loss rather than just move on and avoid it because I would have carried that into my marriage. I didn't want to carry that grief into my marriage. I wanted to grieve it and honor it and get over it and then embrace the new. So, but we're not taught that. And we always equate grief, I think, with death, like at a funeral. And there is so much more grieving that goes on in life that really has nothing to do with a physical death. And I think you're totally right. With this pandemic, people are grieving. They're grieving life as they knew it. But I also think they're grieving things that were habits and part of their life that was toxic and unhealthy. And you have to grieve it because it's hard to change and no longer live that way when it has become so comfortable and so ordinary and such a part of your identity that when it's ripped away, everyone doesn't know what to do with that anymore. But I think it's going to birth some amazing things. I mean, as we know, out of the darkness comes beautiful new life. Even in scripture, when it talks about how the stump of Jesse, right, a shoot will come up out of the stump of Jesse. When a tree is cut off, oftentimes a little shoot will appear, a little sapling comes out. There is new life that resurrects out of the ashes. And I hope that that's what we're moving into, maybe it's not normal or a new normal. How about just new life?
I
love that. Yeah.
Yes. And amen.
Yeah.
It was, this is on a personal note, which we like to do sometimes as a little tangent, but, I've been talking with my therapist a lot about grief. I recently, and that concept of that it's not always, that we always equate it with death. Right. And so, I recently went through, eating disorder treatment. I actually went like to a treatment facility, and basically the conversation we were having was that I was having a hard time grieving the eating disorder. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm so glad I'm not, actively in those patterns and in those habits anymore. And she was like, yes, but there was a reason you did that. There was comfort that it brought. And that was your way of life. And so naturally there's going to be a grieving process for it as well, even though it was such a painful, not healthy, not life-giving activity that I was partaking in. But anyway, all that to be said is that theme for me has been circling of just grieving these things. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I've always like just pushed through and like, okay, so what's the next thing? How can I fix this? How can I fill it with something else? And that's just not the space that I'm called to be in this season. I'm in a season of grief as well. And so I just think that picture you painted of Jesus, and I always picture him wiping away my tear, like the last tear I'm going to have, just wiping it away. And anyway, it's just a beautiful picture of Jesus that you painted for us. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So our podcast, if you don't know, is all about talents and gifts. And the reason why we have a podcast about this very privileged conversation is that we believe, because we have the privilege of having these conversations, that comes with responsibility, that we have a responsibility to name our talents and gifts that God has given us, to cultivate them, to work in collaboration with others. To what end, of course, is to share the good news of King Jesus. And we like to paint the picture, so to speak, that there's God is building his kingdom, and we get to have our brick in that, and we are building our brick that he's going to use in his kingdom. And so he has, again, equipped us with talents and gifts to do the good works, to meet people and start ministries and do movies and write books and have podcasts and go on ships. And so anyway, we're building our brick. And so that's why we have Project Brickworks. But anyway, all that to be said, just to kind of paint you a picture of why we're having this, why we like to have these conversations. So in all of your different things that you've done, what have you found are the talents and gifts that God has given you specifically?
Well, that's a tough one because, I think there's a lot of different seasons of gifting, but I would say for me, speaking and teaching is my passion and in a lot of ways my gifting. It's not something I've done much in the past 2 years, but I have always loved a microphone in my hand, if you will. And anyone who's going to listen, I'm going to talk. I love to speak. I love public speaking. I love to share about the life that God has given me and the lessons that I've learned. I love to open up the Bible and just teach the word of God. I love that. And I believe in a lot of ways that is a gift that God has given me to be able to speak to people about Jesus. So I would say that. And then the other thing, which I know it's always a debate whether it's a gift or not, but hospitality. We are all called in Scripture to be hospitable, to welcome people in and take care of people, give them a drink, something to eat. But I just feel like that's just one of my gifts. Yeah. I love to create spaces where people feel safe and people feel welcomed in my home. And that always incorporates food. I have a strong philosophy that banana bread ushers in the presence of the Holy Spirit.
I will second that. Amen.
Okay, right? So I love to entertain. I love to have people in my home. And that's a gift that's been given to me through the generations. My grandmother, my mother, we love that. So I would say speaking and teaching, and heck, if I can do it in my home while I'm serving you banana bread, then there we go.
Using it all together. I love it.
That's awesome.
And you mentioned a second ago that you haven't really gotten to do that in the last 2 years, but I think your podcast, is a huge use of that talent and that gifting. It's not public speaking in the normal sense, but it's totally using your talents and gifts. 100%.
Yeah, that's so cool.
And I was definitely going to affirm that for you if you didn't name communication. Clearly you're an excellent communicator.
Great communicator.
You.
So one of the things that you said in our back and forth as we were preparing for this, and I just love this. You said, I'm kind of obsessed with food though. All of our travels and weekend adventures revolve around food, finding the best restaurants and trying new things. I so resonate with that. We're constantly on TripAdvisor to find the the top restaurant that's not a chain when we're in a new city.
Yep.
So, I mean, we're totally speaking the same language. Anyway, I love that. Yes. So tell us about maybe one of your favorite adventures that you've had with food and
yes.
travel.
Oh my gosh. I got to say that is an easy one for me, because whereas I could go on and on about all the times we've traveled just to eat, there is one story that rises to the top. So a couple of years ago, my husband and I were in Paris for a week. We had planned this phenomenal family vacation to Europe for several weeks with my parents. My father worked overseas my whole life. He didn't live overseas, but he worked all over the world. And it was important. It was such a big part of my growing up, was to have different cultures brought home. My mother would also travel with him every fall, and they would bring home foods and, different things. We eventually would go with them a little bit. But that was a big part of my growing up. And I wanted my children to experience that with my parents. So we planned this big trip together. Unfortunately, a couple weeks before the trip, it had to be canceled. So we weren't able to go. And we'd already booked all of our flights, our train tickets, all of our villas and apartments and chalets, and, and so we were quickly on the phone, canceling everything. And everybody was so gracious to us to fully refund us everything except the apartment in Paris. They would not refund any of our money, and they would not let us cancel. So my husband and I wrestled with it a little bit. Like, do we take our kids to Paris for 1 week? And I said, absolutely not. That is way too much money to blow on airfare for 1 week. The kids had never been overseas before. So in the end, my husband and I said, okay, you know what? Just the two of us. We'll go. We've already paid for the hotel and we had free tickets and we had enough points for he and I. So let's just go.
Nice.
So we went to Paris for a week. It was lovely. But there was this one day we were up visiting Sacré-Cœur, which is the Sacred Heart Cathedral. And I'd already picked out our restaurant that we were going to. And so after we toured the cathedral, it started to rain a little bit. It was so romantic. And we started to walk to this precious little restaurant. And when we got there, it was closed. And I quickly grabbed my phone and I look it up and I said, well, it says online that it's open, but clearly it's not. So we were kind of left without a plan, back in the olden days when there was no Google or Yelp. And so you would just stumbled upon beautiful cafes in Europe. So we were walking around in the rain and I looked up and saw this little restaurant called Le Coquelicot. And I said, well, let's just go in there. It looks like they had little specials painted on the window, and for each day of the week. And that day was the equivalent of macaroni and cheese with chicken, with a glass of wine for 25 euros or whatever. So I said, let's go in here. So we ducked in out of the rain, and beautiful restaurant. I mean, oh my goodness. It was clean and modern. And you could tell that not a soul in there was a tourist. Everyone was local and it was phenomenal. So we go in and sit down, and I wanted the special. And let me tell you, it was not macaroni and cheese with chicken. Okay. It was the most amazing noodles with this creamy, cheesy sauce with the most juicy, delectable roast chicken I've ever had in my life.
Yay.
But before that, on the appetizers, there was this corn soup. And it said popcorn and different little things. And I thought, I want to try that. So I ordered it. When this came to the table, there was a little bowl placed before me with a couple pieces of popcorn in it, some seeds, and a little bit of herbs. And then the waiter comes to do a tableside pour. And I started to freak out a little bit. So I get my phone and I'm trying not to be some total goobery tourist, but I'm like, I have to video this guy, And he pours this liquid gold into the bowl and the popcorn rises to the top. And I am just sitting there going, this is gorgeous. He walks away, put the spoon in the bowl, put it in my mouth, and something happened that I never in a million years would have thought could happen to me. I immediately started to cry. And my husband looked at me and I was just as shocked as he was. And he goes, what's wrong? And I go, I don't know. I just was overcome with emotion. It was the most incredible thing I had ever put in my mouth. And it evoked emotion. It made me cry.
That's awesome.
The whole meal, the whole setting was phenomenal, but it's become a joke. If I eat something, my kids will be like, are you going to cry? But that to me was a standout moment for a food adventure.
Oh, I love it.
Oh, and especially
that popcorn soup. And then we did end up taking the kids with us back to Paris when we were on our way to the ship.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yay.
We spent a week and a half in Paris with the kids, and we went back to this restaurant. Of course, the corn soup was not on the menu that day. I was dying.
No.
But we had a great experience, but none of us cried.
Excellent.
I love that.
So funny. It's going to be on my list now. I'm going to have to go there.
Well, apparently they have a restaurant in New York too.
Oh,
Rico.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I have to look that up.
Have to. Yeah. That's fantastic. That is such a funny story.
That is.
Well, tell us how folks can connect with you.
Yeah. So our podcast, New Mercies, you can look us up. We are on any of your favorite listening platforms, whether that's Spotify, Google, Amazon, obviously Apple. You can find New Mercies Podcast, and you can also follow us on Instagram, again, New Mercies Podcast, where we have different photos that we put up of our guests and their time serving on board the ship, as well as just some insight into upcoming guests.
Oh my gosh.
So cool.
That is.
And so now that you've listened to this podcast, wherever you have listened to it, go listen to that one. That is awesome. Yes. And what about you personally? Do you have a website?
I do. It's RaeanneNewquist.com. And I was an avid blogger for quite some time. And I have to say that it's stalled out a little bit in the recent months, but maybe we'll pick that back up again.
Yeah.
So it's RaeanneNewquist.com.
Very cool.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for your time and sharing your heart with us. And just being a very generous guest. We are so grateful.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I just knew when we met in Nashville, I was like, yeah, that's
the one.
This is good. This is a good connection. So thank you so much.
Thank you guys. This has been so fun. I'm so envious that you guys get to do this as a mother-daughter duo.
Oh, it's a lot of fun.
I love what you're doing. Thanks for having me.
I actually just thought of another question real quick before we wrap up. You mentioned how people can connect with Mercy Ships. If someone wants to do that, what's the best way for them to get connected and plugged in? Are there certain qualifications, things like that, just in case anybody is like, wow, yep, I want to do that?
Yeah. So what's really great about Mercy Ships, a lot of people immediately think, oh, it's a hospital ship. I'm not medical. I can't go. But we need volunteers in every area and aspect. So like I mentioned, there's teachers on board because we have a fully accredited academy from kindergarten through 12th grade.
Right.
We also have, we need housekeepers, we need cooks and receptionists, we need engineers, we need maritime professionals, HVAC people, you name it. It's a whole village, a whole city on a ship. So everyone has a part to play, and each role comes for a different amount of time. So I know for our family, chaplaincy was a 2-year commitment. Most teachers are 2-year commitments. But receptionists can come for 3 months, or some doctors come for 2 weeks. So you can find all those opportunities at mercyships.org/volunteer.
Perfect.
Gosh, that's awesome.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much. It was such a blessing to meet you, and have a great rest of your day. And thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank
God
you
bless.
guys.
Thank you guys so much for listening. This podcast is made possible through generous listeners and friends like you, and we are so very grateful to our supporters. If you would like to sponsor an episode, you can head over to thecollaborationconversation.org and click sponsor an episode.
For more information on Project Brickworks, visit us online at projectbrickworks.org, subscribe to our newsletter, or text BRICK to 55498 to get the latest news and updates. We love y'all. Be blessed, and we'll see you next time.